All right, let's unpack this. Today we're embarking on a fascinating deep dive into a truly transformative period in Indian history. We're talking roughly 600 BCE to 600 CE.
A huge span of time, over 1,000 years.
Exactly. And in this time, we witness the emergence and the profound evolution of states, the dramatic rise of powerful empires, and the intricate mechanics of early economies taking shape right across the subcontinent.
It's a period of massive change.
What makes this journey so compelling is the incredible tapestry of sources we'll be exploring. We've got ancient inscriptions whispering stories from stone, foundational texts offering insights into societal norms, the gleam of old coins revealing vast trade networks, and, fascinating visual material bringing the past to life.
A really rich mix of evidence.
Our mission, as always, is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, those surprising insights from these diverse sources. We want to help you understand what truly matters for grasping this foundational era.
And it really is foundational.
Absolutely. We'll be keeping a keen eye on the crucial facts and concepts, the things frequently asked in competitive exams like the IAS. The goal is ensuring that this understanding provides a rock-solid foundation for your broader historical context.
That's a perfect framing. And what truly stands out here is how this particular period marks such a profound shift from what came before. Prior to 600 BCE, we were seeing the lingering developments from the post-Harappan era.
Right, things like the Rig Veda.
Exactly. Picture the composition of the Rig Veda, early agricultural and pastoral settlements slowly spreading across the subcontinent. And those distinctive megalithic burial structures in central and south India, often revealing early iron tools and weapons. Those megaliths are quite something.
They really are.
But then, around the 6th century BCE, something truly significant began to coalesce. It's a major turning point, no question.
Turning point how? Exactly.
Well, we see fundamental agricultural changes taking hold, the undeniable rise of highly organized states, and the burgeoning growth of urban centers. It's not just like a slow evolution. It's a complete reorganization of society on a pretty grand scale. Hashtag unlocking the past, the power of epigraphy.
Okay, and to even begin to understand this monumental transformation, we absolutely have to talk about one of the most, momentous developments in Indian epigraphy.
Couldn't agree more.
I'm referring to the incredible breakthroughs back in the 1830s, spearheaded by a name that's frankly non-negotiable for anyone studying Indian history, James Prinsep.
Prinsep, yes. Absolute crucial figure.
He wasn't a historian by trade, interestingly. He was an officer in the East India Company's mint, but he quite literally unlocked ancient India for us.
It's an amazing story.
Prinsep successfully deciphered two crucial long-lost scripts, Brahmi and Kharosthi.
Which were everywhere, on inscriptions, coins.
Exactly. These are the mysterious writings found on the earliest inscriptions and coins, which, up until his work, were just an unreadable enigma. It's really hard to overstate the importance of this.
It opened up a whole new world.
And here's where it gets truly fascinating. As he meticulously worked through these inscriptions, he noticed a recurring pattern. Most of them mentioned a king referred to as Piyadasi, meaning pleasant to behold.
Piyadasi, right.
And then on a few specific inscriptions, he found the name Ashoka. Now, this was a eureka moment of monumental proportions.
You can imagine.
Ashoka was a famously significant ruler, known from Buddhist texts, but prior to this, he was largely, a figure from religious literature.
Almost legendary in a way.
Right. Suddenly, this historical figure was connected to real, tangible, datable records etched in stone. This single discovery revolutionized the reconstruction of early Indian political history.
It really set the foundations.
Yeah. It truly set the broad contours of our understanding by the early 20th century. It allowed scholars to begin charting the lineages of major dynasties. And over time, the focus expanded beyond just the kings and their battles to include the social and economic context that shaped these political changes.
A much richer picture started to emerge.
So understanding James Prinsep, Brahmi, and Kharosthi isn't just about memorizing facts for an exam, though that's important too. It's about appreciating the foundation upon which, all our knowledge of early India rests.
That's a crucial point. Prinsep's decipherment truly allowed us to hear voices from millennia ago, directly from the source. Epigraphy, as a field, is precisely the scientific study of these inscriptions, writings engraved on hard, durable surfaces like stone, metal, or even pottery.
So they were meant to last.
Absolutely. These aren't fleeting documents. They are virtually permanent records designed to last. They typically record the achievements of kings, royal proclamations, or significant donations made to religious institutions by individuals, and sometimes even by women, which offers these rare glimpses into their agency, their role in society.
Okay, that's really interesting.
A vital point to consider here is how detailed and reliable these records can be. Inscriptions are dated in two main ways. Either they carry a direct date, which is incredibly helpful for precise chronology,
Obviously.
or they're dated through paleography, which is the meticulous study of writing styles.
Paleography. So like how the letters changed over time.
Exactly. The shapes of letters, much like handwriting, evolve subtly but consistently over time, and this gives epigraphists a remarkable amount of precision. For instance, the letter A in Brahmi was written one particular way around 250 BCE, but by 500 CE, it had visibly changed its form. It's quite distinct.
Wow, that
Yeah.
detail.
Yes. And the earliest inscriptions were predominantly in Prakrit, which was the language of ordinary people across various regions. This made the royal messages accessible to a broader populace.
Not just Sanskrit then.
Not initially, no. Prakrit was key. But we also find Pali, Tamil, and later, yes, Sanskrit being used for inscriptions and text during this period. You'll notice that the names of rulers, like Ajatasattu and Ashoka, are often presented in their Prakrit forms in historical accounts, directly reflecting the original language of these vital records.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
This deep insight into the languages and dating methods of these sources is critical for your understanding, especially for exams, as it shows the painstaking work that goes into reconstructing history. It's not just guesswork. Hashtag the cradle of states, Mahajanapadas, and early governance.
Now that we've grasped the fundamental tools historians use to piece together the past, let's turn our attention back to the period itself, zooming in on that critical 6th century BCE once more.
Right, that pivotal moment.
This era is consistently highlighted as a major turning point in early Indian history because it's when we see the definitive emergence of early states, the growth of true cities, the widespread use of iron,
Iron tools, iron weapons, a
Yeah.
game changer.
and the development of coinage. This era also witnessed the flourishing of diverse systems of thought, notably Buddhism and Jainism, which profoundly influenced society.
Huge philosophical and religious shifts happening simultaneously.
Central to this political landscape were what early Buddhist and Jaina texts refer to as the 16 Mahajanapadas, the great states.
The Mahajanapadas, yes.
While the lists of these states can vary slightly across different texts, some names consistently appear, making them absolutely crucial for you to remember for any exam. These include Vaji, Magadha, Koshala, Kuru, Panchala, Gandhara, and Avanti. Get those names down.
Definitely key names.
The term Janapada itself is quite illuminating. It simply means the land where a jana, a people, clan, or tribe, sets its foot or settles.
So a shift from nomadic life to settled territory.
Precisely. It's the foundational concept for these early political units, marking that shift from tribal wanderings to settled, organized territories.
That's a fascinating outline of their emergence. And it brings us directly to how these early states actually structured themselves and the challenges they faced in governing.
Right. How did they actually work?
You see, while most of these Mahajanapadas were indeed monarchies, ruled by a single king, there were also distinct forms of government known as ganas or sanghas.
Ganas and Sanghas.
And these were essentially oligarchies, where power wasn't concentrated in a single king, but was shared by a group of men, often collectively referred to as rashas.
So like rule by committee almost.
In a way, yes. And it's a significant detail that both Mahavira, the founder of Jainism, and the Buddha himself belonged to such ganas. That truly tells you something about the alternative political structures and, the philosophical debates that existed during this formative period. It wasn't all just kings.
That's a really important nuance.
In some instances, like the famous Vaji Sangha, these rajas likely controlled important resources, such as land, collectively. It demonstrates a different model of economic and political power.
So not just individual ownership.
Potentially not, or at least shared control at the top level. Reconstructing the full histories of these ganas and sanghas can be challenging. The sources are sometimes limited. But what we do know is that some of them managed to persist for surprisingly long periods, nearly 1,000 years in some cases.
1,000 years, wow.
Which speaks to their resilience and effectiveness, offering a different path to stability than absolute monarchy.
And whether they were monarchies or these more communal ganas, these early states shared some common defining features, didn't they?
They did. Each Mahajanapada, for instance, typically boasted a capital city, which was almost always fortified.
Fortified cities. That implies defense, resources.
Exactly. Think about the sheer scale of the undertaking required to maintain these fortified cities, not to mention the incipient armies and bureaucracies that were beginning to form to support the state. All of this demanded significant and consistent resources.
Which is where taxes come in, I assume?
Precisely.
Hmm.
It's no surprise, then, that from about the 6th century BCE onwards, Brahmanas began composing Sanskrit texts called the Dharma Sutras.
The Dharma Sutras. Okay, what did they say?
These texts laid down specific norms for rulers, ideally expecting them to be kshatriyas, the traditional warrior and ruling class. The Dharma Sutras explicitly advised rulers on how to generate revenue by collecting taxes and tribute from cultivators, traders, and artisans.
So targeting the productive sectors.
Mostly, yes. While it's less clear how they consistently procured resources from, say, pastoralists and forest peoples, what is known is that raids on neighboring states were often seen as a perfectly legitimate means of acquiring wealth. It reflects a more aggressive, expansionist approach to resource mobilization.
Wow, okay, so raiding was just part of the system.
It seems so. We also see a crucial distinction emerging. Some states began to acquire standing armies and maintain regular bureaucracies, the hallmarks of more developed states, while others continued to rely on militias, often recruited from the peasantry, which probably made them inherently less stable. That makes sense. A standing army provides more consistent power. Exactly. So understanding the names of the Mahajanapadas, the role of the Dharma Sutras, the different types of governance, and the methods of tax collection, these are absolutely foundational for grasping this period, particularly for exam preparation. #tag the ascendancy of Magadha. It's truly remarkable how one of these Mahajanapadas, Magadha, managed to outstrip all others and become the preeminent power.
Magadha, right, the big one.
Between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE, Magadha, located in present-day Bihar, rose to unprecedented dominance. Modern historians attribute this ascendancy not to a single factor, but to a powerful combination of material advantages that created this self-reinforcing engine of power.
Okay, what were these advantages?
Firstly, Magadha was a region with exceptionally productive agriculture, particularly in its fertile alluvial plains. That provided a strong economic base and ensured food security for a large population.
Food is fundamental.
Absolutely. Secondly, they had crucial and, importantly, unparalleled access to rich iron mines in present-day Jharkhand. Iron again. So crucial. It supplied the raw materials for superior agricultural tools, leading to even greater yields and critically formidable weapons, giving them a definite military edge.
Tools and weapons, got it.
Thirdly, the dense forests in the region provided elephants.
The elephants, as in war elephants.
Exactly. They became an invaluable and frankly terrifying component of their military, effectively acting as ancient tanks.
I can imagine that's quite an advantage.
And finally, the Ganga River and its tributaries offered incredibly cheap and convenient communication and transportation routes. This connected them to vast areas, facilitating trade, troop movement, and administrative control in ways no other state could easily match.
So geography was definitely on their side.
Hugely. But this contrast brings up an interesting debate in historical explanations. While modern historians often emphasize these material and geographical factors,
which make a lot of sense,
early Buddhist and Jaina writers offered a different yet maybe complementary perspective. They attributed Magadha's power primarily to the sheer ambition and astute policies of specific individuals. They talk about ruthlessly ambitious kings such as Bimbisara, Ajatasattu, and Mahapadmananda, along with their shrewd ministers who helped implement their strategies.
So great leaders versus great resources.
Or perhaps a combination of both. This highlights how different historical perspectives focusing on underlying material conditions versus the agency and decisions of powerful individuals can both contribute to our overall understanding. History is rarely explained by just one simple cause.
That's a really important point. It's usually complex.
Always.
And speaking of Magadha's strategic power, their capitals also shifted over time, didn't they? Reflecting their evolving priorities and expansionist ambitions.
They did. Initially, the capital was Rajagaha, which is the Prakrit name for present-day Rajgir in Bihar.
Rajagaha, House of the King.
Exactly. Its name literally means House of the King, and it was a naturally fortified settlement nestled among hills, providing excellent natural defense, made it difficult for enemies to attack.
Smart choice for an early capital.
Very. But then, in the 4th century BCE, there was a strategically significant shift. The capital moved to Pataliputra, which is present-day Patna.
Pataliputra. Okay, why the move?
This move was incredibly astute, because Pataliputra commanded communication routes along the mighty Ganga River. This gave them unparalleled control over riverine trade, troop movements, and administrative communication throughout the region. This geographical command proved crucial for their continued expansion.
Control the river, control the region.
Pretty much. So for anyone preparing for competitive exams, it's vital to know the names of these powerful kings like Bimbisara, Ajatasattu, and Mahapadmananda, as well as the capitals, Rajagaha and Pataliputra, and the key geographical advantages: agriculture, iron, elephants, rivers that propelled Magadha to its leading position. These are classic exam topics. #Shag the Mauryan Empire, a grand experiment.
The relentless growth and strategic brilliance of Magadha ultimately culminated in the emergence of an empire that would forever change the face of early India, the Mauryan Empire.
The first great Indian empire, really.
This grand experiment in imperial governance was founded by Chandragupta Maurya around 321 BCE, and under his leadership, Mauryan control extended incredibly far, reaching northwest into Afghanistan and Baluchistan. Quite an expanse.
A huge territory for the time.
But perhaps the most famous ruler of early India, and certainly one you'll encounter repeatedly in your studies, was his grandson, Ashoka.
Ashoka the Great. Everyone knows Ashoka.
He reigned from about 272 or 268 BCE to 231 BCE. And it was Ashoka who conquered Kalinga, which is present-day coastal Orissa. An event that profoundly shaped his reign and ultimately led to his unique philosophy of governance, known as dhamma.
The Kalinga War was pivotal, and dhamma is central to understanding Ashoka. To reconstruct the rich and complex history of the Mauryan Empire, historians have had to draw upon a truly diverse array of sources. Each offers a different lens, you see.
Right, not just one type of evidence.
For instance, we have significant archaeological finds, especially the impressive stone sculpture of the period, like the iconic lion capital.
Which is now a national symbol of India.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about the grandeur of the Mauryan state. Then there are contemporary written accounts, such as the fragments that survive from Megasthenes.
Megasthenes.
The Greek ambassador.
That's him. He visited Chandragupta Maurya's court and left valuable observations about the administration and society, though only fragments remain.
Still incredibly valuable, though.
Absolutely. Another incredibly valuable source is the Arthashastra. The treatise on statecraft.
A comprehensive treatise on statecraft, economics, and military strategy. Parts of it are traditionally attributed to Kautilya, or Chanakya, Chandragupta's legendary minister.
Kautilya, yes. A fascinating text.
Beyond these, the Mauryas are mentioned in later Buddhist, Jaina, and Puranic literature, as well as various Sanskrit literary works, offering different perspectives and narratives. However, arguably the most valuable and direct sources for understanding this empire, especially Ashoka's reign, are his own inscriptions.
The rock and pillar edicts.
Found on natural rocks and highly polished pillars spread across his vast dominion. They are unparalleled primary sources.
So for competitive exams, Chandragupta Maurya as the founder.
To use.
Ashoka as the most famous ruler, the pivotal Kalinga War.
Yeah.
And crucially, these key literary sources like the Arthashastra and Megasthenes account, along with the unparalleled importance of Ashokan inscriptions as primary evidence.
You've got it. Those are absolutely key takeaways.
Ashoka was truly unique among ancient rulers, wasn't he? Demonstrating this novel approach to governance.
Definitely. He was the first ruler to inscribe his messages directly onto stone surfaces, both natural rocks and these beautifully polished pillars. And he used these inscriptions to proclaim what he understood to be dhamma.
Okay, so let's get into dhamma. What exactly was it?
Well, it wasn't a rigid religious dogma in the conventional sense. It was more a set of universal ethical principles.
Like a moral code?
Kind of. It included fundamental virtues like respect towards elders, profound generosity towards brahmanas, and those who had renounced worldly life, kind and humane treatment of slaves and servants, and notably respect for all religions and traditions, not just one's own. That's quite remarkable for the time.
Respect for all religions. That is significant.
Ashoka's profound aim with Dhamma was to ensure the well-being of people in this world and to guide them towards spiritual merit in the next.
And how did he spread this message, just carving it on rocks?
Well, that was a big part of it, making it permanent and public. But he also appointed special officers, known as Dhamma Mavanta.
Dhamma Mahaba, okay.
These officers traveled the empire, disseminating his message and actively promoting welfare, ensuring the principles were understood and hopefully followed.
So an active propagation effort.
Very much so. Administering such a vast and diverse empire was, well, an absolutely enormous undertaking. A true logistical marvel for its time.
I can only imagine the challenges.
The Mauryan Empire, as revealed by Ashokan inscriptions, had 5 major political centers. the imperial capital Pataliputra, and 4 strategically located provincial centers, Taxila, Ujjayini, Tosali, and Suvarnagiri.
Taxila, Ujjayini, Tosali, Suvarnagiri. Got it.
Well, the same universal message of Dhamma was engraved across this vast territory, stretching from the northwest frontier provinces of modern-day Pakistan down to Andhra Pradesh and Orissa. Historians increasingly recognize that a uniform administrative system across such diverse regions was highly unlikely. The differences were just too vast.
Right, like administering the hills of Afghanistan versus the coast of Orissa. Completely different worlds.
Exactly. Control was almost certainly strongest around the capital and these provincial centers, and they were chosen for very specific reasons.
Such as?
Taxila and Ujjayini, for example, were situated on important long-distance trade routes. This allowed the empire to control and benefit from lucrative commerce.
Control the trade routes, control the wealth.
Precisely. Suvarnagiri, meaning Golden Mountain, was probably vital for tapping into the rich gold mines of Karnataka, providing essential metallic resources for the state.
Ah, Golden Mountain. Makes sense.
Communication across this immense territory was absolutely crucial for maintaining cohesion and control. Journeys from the center to the provinces could take weeks, even months.
Weeks or months.
It required meticulous arrangements for provisions and protection for those traveling, especially for the imperial army.
Logistics must have been incredibly complex.
And Megasthenes provides a fascinating glimpse into the Mauryan military's organization. It reveals a level of bureaucratic sophistication that's truly remarkable for empire of that age.
What did he say about the army?
He describes a massive army managed by a committee with 6 specialized subcommittees. One looked after the navy.
It had a navy.
Apparently so. Another managed transport and provisions, which was a logistical marvel in itself, covering everything from arranging bullock carts for equipment to procuring food for soldiers and fodder for animals, and even recruiting servants and artisans.
That's incredibly detailed planning.
And the others were responsible for foot soldiers, horses, chariots, and elephants.
A whole package.
This detailed, multifaceted structure speaks volumes about the meticulous planning, extensive resources, and immense scale the Mauryans poured into maintaining their vast empire.
So, for exams, pay close attention to Ashoka's Dhamma and its practical principles, the key administrative centers, and their strategic importance.
Definitely.
Megasthenes' fascinating account of the military and the vital role of trade routes in imperial communication.
Those are all prime areas to focus on.
Now, when historians first began reconstructing early Indian history back in the 19th century, the Mauryan Empire was seen as an absolutely monumental landmark, wasn't it? Almost like a golden age.
Yes, particularly for Indian historians under colonial rule.
Right. India was part of the British Empire then. So for 19th and early 20th century Indian historians, the idea that such a sophisticated and expansive empire existed in early India was both challenging to the colonial narrative and incredibly exciting for the nascent nationalist movement.
It provided a powerful narrative of past glory, a counterpoint to contemporary subjugation.
Exactly. The spectacular art, particularly the Mauryan stone sculpture, like the Lion Capital, was considered a prime example of imperial artistic achievement and a symbol of national pride. Many historians also found Ashoka's message in his inscriptions profoundly different and inspiring compared to the grandiose titles adopted by later rulers.
His focus on Dhamma felt unique.
It's no wonder nationalist leaders in the 20th century viewed him as an inspiring figure, an ideal king who ruled with compassion.
He became a symbol of righteous rule.
However, modern historical perspectives offer a more, let's say, nuanced view, encouraging us to step beyond that early romanticization.
Yes, historical understanding evolves.
When we ask, how important was the Mauryan Empire, really? A more complex picture emerges. For one, it only lasted for about 150 years.
Which, in the grand scheme of Indian history, isn't actually that long.
Not really. Furthermore, if you look at a map, you'll see it didn't encompass the entire subcontinent, and even within its claimed frontiers, administrative control wasn't uniformly strong or direct everywhere.
Control likely varied significantly across regions.
And by the 2nd century BCE, we already see new chiefdoms and kingdoms emerging in various parts of the subcontinent.
Which indicates that the Mauryan imperial grip had weakened considerably, and its centralized model wasn't universally adopted or perhaps sustainable in the long run.
So this difference in interpretation of the Mauryan Empire's significance, from a monolithic golden age to a powerful but relatively short-lived imperial experiment, is a key point to understand.
Absolutely. It challenges older, simpler narratives often found in textbooks. It's about understanding the complexity and the limitations of that imperial model. #new notions of kingship in the post-Mauryan period. Following the decline of the Mauryan Empire, the political landscape, well, it fragmented quite a bit. And we see the emergence of new and distinct kingdoms, particularly in the Deccan and further south.
So a move away from that centralized empire.
Exactly. Notable among these were the remarkably stable and prosperous chiefdoms of the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas. They were situated in what was known as Pamilokam, the ancient Tamil country, encompassing parts of present-day Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu.
Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas, important names for the south.
Very. And to understand them, it's important to differentiate chiefs and chiefdoms from the more centralized traditional kingships we've been discussing.
Okay, how were they different?
A chief was a powerful man whose position might or might not be hereditary, but who typically drew strong support from his kinfolk and local communities. His functions involved presiding over special rituals, leading in warfare, and arbitrating disputes.
So more community-based leadership.
In a sense. And crucially, unlike kings who collected regular taxes, chiefs received gifts from their subordinates, which they would then redistribute among their supporters. It was a system of reciprocal exchange that fostered loyalty.
Gift-giving rather than taxing. Interesting.
Generally, chiefdoms did not maintain regular standing armies or a formal bureaucracy in the same way an empire would. Their power structure was different.
And how do we know about them?
We learn about these states primarily from the rich body of early Tamil Sangam texts.
Sangam literature. Right.
These are exquisite collections of poems vividly describing these chiefs, their exploits, and how they acquired and distributed resources. They offer a fantastic window into that society.
So understanding these distinctions, chiefdom versus kingdom, and knowing the names of these southern kingdoms, Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas, and the region of Tamilakam is essential.
Absolutely vital for understanding the post-Mauryan South.
Beyond these chiefdoms, we also see rulers like the Satavahanas, who controlled parts of western and central India from around the 2nd century BCE to the 2nd century CE.
The Satavahanas, yes. Very significant in the Deccan.
And the Shakas, a people of Central Asian origin who established kingdoms in the northwest and western subcontinent.
The Shakas coming in from Central Asia.
What's crucial to note is that unlike the earlier agrarian-focused states, many of these new kingdoms, particularly the Satavahanas and Shakas, strategically positioned themselves to tap into the immense wealth flowing from the burgeoning long-distance trade networks.
So trade becomes more central to state power.
It seems so. Commerce turned into a significant pillar of their state revenue. This marked a subtle but important economic shift, moving beyond simple agricultural surplus. What's also intriguing about many of these new rulers is that their social origins were often quite obscure.
Not necessarily from old royal families.
Not always. They weren't necessarily born into established royal lineages. They were often outsiders or newly powerful local figures. Yet once they acquired power, they actively sought to legitimize and claim higher social status through various means.
Which indicates a more fluid social structure, perhaps, where power could pave the way for prestige.
It suggests that, yeah.
That's a vital observation about legitimizing power, and it brings up a key strategy these new rulers employed, identifying themselves with deities, essentially claiming divine status.
Divine kingship, like the pharaohs in Egypt.
A similar concept, yes. This approach is perhaps best exemplified by the Kushanas. They ruled a vast kingdom stretching from Central Asia into northwest India from approximately the 1st century BCE to the 1st century CE.
The Kushanas, okay.
Yeah. Their history has been meticulously reconstructed from inscriptions and textual traditions, but their notions of kingship are most strikingly seen in their coinage and monumental sculpture.
What kind of sculpture?
Colossal statues of Kushana rulers have been unearthed in shrines. There's one at Mat near Mathura in Uttar Pradesh, and another similar shrine found in Afghanistan. Historians interpret these massive, awe-inspiring statues, often depicting rulers in a grand, larger-than-life manner, as a clear indication that the Kushanas consider themselves godlike, bridging the gap between the mortal and the divine.
Trying to project immense power and authority.
Exactly. Many Kushana rulers also explicitly adopted the prestigious title Devaputra.
Devaputra meaning?
Son of God, a concept possibly influenced by contemporary Chinese rulers who referred to themselves as sons of heaven.
Interesting parallel. So for competitive exams, remember the Kushanas, the title Devaputra, and the locations like Mat and Mathura as prime archaeological examples of this concept of divine kingship in ancient India.
Absolutely. Key terms and sites.
By the 4th century CE, we start seeing the emergence of larger and more centralized states once again, don't we? With the mighty Gupta Empire being a prime example.
Yes, the Guptas, often called the Classical Age.
These new states, while powerful, often relied on a complex system involving samantas.
Samantas, explain those.
These were powerful men who maintained themselves and their military through local resources, often through direct control over land and the revenue generated from it.
So like local lords with their own power base.
Pretty much. In return for this autonomy and control over their local domains, they offered homage and provided crucial military support to the larger imperial rulers.
A sort of feudal arrangement, almost.
It has similarities. The dynamic here was fluid and ever-changing. A powerful Samanta could, definitely. Conversely, a weak central ruler might find their authority eroded and themselves reduced to a position of subordination under a particularly powerful Samanta. This system shows a blend of centralized power and decentralized local control.
A delicate balancing act.
Our understanding of the Gupta rulers comes from a rich array of sources, extensive literature, a wide variety of coinage, and especially inscriptions.
Inscriptions remain key.
Among these inscriptions, prashastas are particularly significant. These were compositions, usually in poetry, specifically created in praise of kings or other patrons by court poets.
Praise poems, so maybe not entirely objective history.
Exactly. While historians meticulously extract factual information from these, it's worth remembering that those who composed and read them often valued them as intricate works of poetry and rhetoric, not necessarily as literal, objective historical accounts. You have to read them critically.
Good point.
A perfect and critical example of this is the Prayaga Prashasti, also famously known as the Allahabad Pillar inscription.
The Allahabad Pillar.
Yeah.
Very famous.
It was composed in exquisite Sanskrit by Harishina, the brilliant court poet of Samudragupta.
Samudragupta, arguably the most powerful Gupta ruler.
That's right, reigning in the 4th century CE. The Prayaga Prashasti describes Samudragupta in truly grand and almost mythological terms. It states that he was without an antagonist on earth, possessed of many good qualities adorned by hundreds of good actions, and that he wiped off the fame of other kings with the soles of his feet, a vivid image of his military prowess.
Wow. Quite the praise singer, Harishina.
It even elevates him to a divine status, portraying him as Purusha, the supreme being, and equal to powerful gods like Kubera, Varuna, Indra, and Yama.
So leaning into that divine kingship idea again.
Seems like it. So, for your competitive exams, absolutely commit to memory. The Gupta Empire, the concept of Samantas, Prashastas in general, the Prayaga Prashasti specifically, and the key figures of Samudragupta and his court poet Harishina. These are frequently tested concepts and names.
Definitely high-yield topics for exams. Hashtag a changing countryside, agriculture, and society. It's often incredibly difficult, isn't it, to truly know what ordinary subjects thought about their rulers.
Yeah, inscriptions are usually from the elite perspective.
Exactly. They rarely record the direct experiences or grievances of common people. They weren't commissioning their own diaries or public records, for example. Nevertheless, historians have tried to piece together these popular perceptions by examining stories found in anthologies like the Jatakas and the Panchatantra.
The story collections.
Many of these captivating tales likely originated as oral traditions, passed down through generations before being committed to writing. The Jatakas, for instance, written in Pali, date from around the middle of the 1st millennium CE and offer a fascinating window into societal attitudes.
What do they tell us?
Well, what's particularly revealing here is a story known as the Ganda Tindu Jataka. It paints a vivid picture of the miserable plight of the subjects of a wicked king.
A wicked king story. Classic.
When the king, disguised as a commoner, tried to find out what his people truly thought of him, everyone he encountered, from elderly men and women to cultivators and herders, cursed him relentlessly.
They didn't hold back.
Not at all. They complained bitterly of being attacked by robbers at night and by relentless, oppressive tax collectors during the day. It highlights a pervasive sense of insecurity and exploitation.
Robbers and tax collectors. Tough times.
This desperation was so profound that people abandoned their villages en masse and fled to live in the forest to escape their dire situation.
They just left. Wow.
This story is incredibly insightful because it highlights what seems to be a consistently strained relationship between kings and the rural population, particularly the peasantry. Kings frequently tried to fill their coffers by demanding high taxes, and peasants in particular found these demands utterly oppressive. Escaping into the forest was at times a desperate but viable option, underscoring the severity of the economic burden placed upon them.
That really puts the tax demands into perspective. It wasn't just numbers, it was people's lives. So, To meet these ever-increasing demands for taxes and also to support growing populations, another crucial strategy emerged: significant innovations in agricultural production.
Right, they needed to produce more.
One such game-changer was the widespread adoption of plough agriculture. From around the 6th century BCE, this method spread rapidly in the fertile alluvial river valleys, like those of the Ganga and the Kaveri.
The iron plowshare again.
The introduction of the iron-tipped plowshare allowed cultivators to more effectively turn the dense alluvial soil, especially in areas with high rainfall, leading to much better preparation for sowing, making the land more productive.
Precisely. Furthermore, in some parts of the Ganga Valley, the production of paddy rice was dramatically boosted by the introduction of transplantation.
Transplantation, explain that.
This technique involves growing saplings, first in nurseries, and then carefully replanting them in flooded fields. It ensured a higher survival rate for the young plants and significantly increased yields.
Higher yields, but sounds like hard work.
Oh, it was notoriously back-breaking work for the laborers involved. A testament to the sheer human effort required to feed these growing states.
It's important to note, though, that the use of the iron plowshare wasn't uniform across the subcontinent, was it?
No, definitely not. Cultivators in semi-arid regions, like parts of Punjab and Rajasthan, for instance, didn't widely adopt it until much later, even into the 20th century. The dry, sandy soil didn't benefit as much from its use.
So geography mattered there, too.
And in the hilly tracts of the northeastern and central parts of the subcontinent, hoe agriculture remained much better suited to the terrain, proving more effective than the heavy plow. Different tools for different lands.
Makes sense. Another vital strategy for increasing agricultural output was the systematic use of irrigation.
Right. Absolutely crucial. This was done through various methods:
Ah.
wells, tanks, and less commonly canals.
Who built these?
These crucial irrigation works were often organized and maintained by both local communities and powerful individuals, including kings. Kings often proudly recorded their efforts in inscriptions as a display of their benevolence in public works.
Ah, good PR for the king, too.
Definitely. A famous and critical example, particularly for your competitive exams, is the Sudarshana Lake in Gujarat.
Sudarshana Lake, I've heard of that.
This was an artificial reservoir initially built during the Mauryan period by a local governor, showing the early imperial state's investment in agriculture. We know from a 2nd century CE rock inscription that the Ashoka ruler Rudradaman notably repaired it after a terrible storm.
Rudradaman, the Ashoka ruler.
Okay. Importantly, he claimed to have done so using his own vast resources without imposing any additional tax on his subjects. A clever political move to win popular support.
Look how generous I am.
Pretty much. Later, a Gupta ruler also undertook repairs, as recorded on the same rock, illustrating its long-term importance across different dynasties.
So understanding plough agriculture, transplantation, the various irrigation systems, and the specific example of the Sudarshana Lake and its connection to the Mauryas, Rudradaman, and the Guptas is key for exams.
Absolutely. These are recurring themes. While these new technologies definitely led to an overall increase in agricultural production, the benefits were distributed very unevenly.
Ah, so not everyone benefited equally.
Not at all. This led to a growing differentiation among agriculturalists and a more stratified rural society. Early Buddhist texts, for instance, vividly categorize rural society into distinct groups: landless agricultural laborers, small peasants who owned tiny plots, and large landholders.
A clear hierarchy emerging.
Yes. The term Gahapati was frequently used in Pali texts to describe the latter two categories, the small peasants and large landholders.
Gahapati, what does that mean exactly?
A Gahapati was essentially the owner, master, or head of a household. He exercised significant control over his family, his workers, and his resources, including land and animals. Sometimes the term also functioned as a broader status marker for urban elites, including wealthy merchants, indicating their substantial resources. It signifies control over property and labor.
So a term for the haves.
In a way, yes. Powerful figures naturally emerged from this differentiation. Large landholders and hereditary village headmen who often exercised significant control over other, smaller cultivators in their areas.
Power concentrates.
Early Tamil literature, particularly the Sangam text we mentioned earlier, also delineates different categories of people in villages, such as Velar, large landowners, Uzavar plowmen, and Adamais, slaves.
Velar, Uzavar, Adamai. Okay.
These distinctions likely stem directly from differential access to land, labor, and the new agricultural technologies. Who had what determined their status.
And with land being so important.
Questions of ownership and control over land naturally became crucial. We see these issues being addressed even in legal texts, like the Manusmriti. It outlines specific instructions for kings regarding the importance of boundaries to resolve land disputes, highlighting how central land was to social order and potential conflict.
Boundaries become critical when land is valuable.
Precisely.
Adding another significant layer to the changing countryside was the practice of land grants, wasn't it?
Yes, land grants become very prominent from the early centuries CE.
We find numerous records of land being granted, many meticulously preserved on stone or copper plates. These weren't just verbal agreements.
Now they were formal recorded transactions. These grants were generally made to religious institutions or to brahmanas.
Why them specifically?
Granting land to brahmanas or temples was seen as an act of piety, earning religious merit for the ruler. Such land was often designated as agrahara.
Agrahara, grant to brahmanas.
Yes. An agrahara was land specifically granted to a brahmana, and it came with significant privileges. The recipient was usually exempted from paying land revenue and other dues to the king,
Tax-free land.
and, crucially, was often given the right to collect these dues directly from the local people living on that land.
Wow, so they become like mini landlords.
Essentially, yes. The language of these inscriptions was primarily Sanskrit, reflecting the cultural dominance of Brahmanical traditions. Though later, particularly from the 7th century onwards, parts would also appear in local languages like Tamil or Telugu, indicating the growing importance of regional languages and local contexts.
That's interesting. Here's a truly fascinating and often cited example. Prabhavati Gupta.
Ah yes, Prabhavati Gupta, a very important case.
She was the daughter of Chandragupta II, one of the most important Gupta rulers, and queen of the Vakatakas in the Deccan. According to Sanskrit legal texts, women were typically not supposed to have independent access to resources like land or property.
Right. The general rule was patriarchal control.
However, an inscription clearly indicates that Prabhavati did have access to land, which she then granted. This makes her an exceptional case.
So why was she an exception?
Well, it might be because she was an exceptionally powerful queen, given her lineage, daughter of a Gupta emperor, and her political marriage, or it suggests that the provisions of legal texts were not always uniformly implemented across the board. Reality often differed from prescriptive norms.
That's a crucial point. Law versus practice.
These inscriptions also provide invaluable insights into the rural populations. They included brahmanas, peasants, and various other groups expected to provide produce to the new lord, the grant recipient, and obey his commands. This is vividly detailed in Prabhavati Gupta's Danguna inscription. It lays out the obligations of the villagers.
So the grants directly impacted the lives of the people living on that land.
Absolutely. The sizes of these land grants varied regionally, from small plots to vast stretches of uncultivated land, as did the specific rights given to the Dunnies over the land and its inhabitants.
Not a uniform practice, then.
The impact and purpose of these land grants are actually a subject of heated and ongoing debate among historians. This is a key point to grasp for deeper understanding.
Okay, what's the debate?
Some scholars argue that land grants were a deliberate strategy by ruling lineages to extend agriculture into new, undeveloped areas, thereby increasing their overall resource base and bringing more territory under their nominal control.
So an expansion strategy. Makes sense.
Others, however, propose a more complex interpretation. They suggest that these grants were indicative of weakening political power.
Weakening power. How so?
The idea is that kings were losing direct control over their samantas and thus tried to win allies and shore up loyalty by making these grants, essentially giving away future revenue in exchange for current political support.
Buying loyalty with land grants. Interesting.
They also propose that kings might have used this practice to project themselves as supermen or powerful patrons, a facade of power, precisely because they were losing real, direct administrative control over vast territories.
So a sign of weakness disguised as strength.
That's the argument. It's also important to remember that some groups remained largely beyond the reach of state officials or samantas.
Like who?
Mobile pastoralists, fisherfolk, hunter-gatherers, mobile artisans, shifting cultivators, their lives were less tied to settled agriculture.
And we consequently have very few detailed records of their lives or how they interacted with the more settled agricultural societies. Their history is harder to reconstruct.
Exactly. So for your competitive exams, pay close attention to the terms Gahapati, Velar, Uzavar, and Adamai. Understand the concept of land grants and agrahara. Recall Prabhavati Gupta's unique case, and crucially, grasp the different interpretations historians have about the purpose and socioeconomic impact of land grants. It shows analytical depth.
Understanding those debates is key to a more nuanced historical understanding. Hashtag towns, trade, and coinage, the economic engine.
Let's shift our focus now to the vibrant economic engine of this period. The towns, the extensive trade networks, and the critical role of coinage.
The urban and commercial side of things.
New urban centers began to emerge across the subcontinent from around the 6th century BCE, marking a significant societal shift. Many of these, as we've already discussed, served as the capitals of the burgeoning Mahajanapadas.
Cities becoming centers of power.
What's critical for your understanding of their success is their strategic location. Almost all major towns were situated along vital communication routes, acting as economic hubs.
Location, location, location. Still true today.
Pataliputra, for instance, thrived on riverine routes along the mighty Ganga, allowing efficient transport of goods. Ujjaini was strategically placed along major land routes, facilitating overland trade across central India. And then you had cities like Puhar, located near the coast, serving as a crucial gateway to lucrative sea routes connecting India to distant lands.
Land routes, river routes, sea routes. Cities popped up at the intersection.
Many cities, like Mathura, became bustling centers of commercial, cultural, and political activity. They acted as key nodes in the expanding networks of the time, often developing into major religious centers as well.
Multifunctional hubs.
The history of Pataliputra itself is a microcosm of this urban evolution. It started as a humble village called Pataligrama.
Pataligrama, yes.
Then grew into the capital of Magadha, and by the 4th century BCE, it was the Mauryan capital and one of the largest and most prosperous cities in Asia.
A real megacity for its time.
However, its importance later declined, and by the 7th century CE, when the famous Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang visited, he found it largely in ruins with a very small population.
Illustrating the transient nature of urban prosperity. Cities rise and fall.
Indeed.
Life in these fortified cities was dynamic and complex, though conducting extensive archaeological excavations there is often challenging.
Why is that?
Because many of them are still continuously inhabited today, built upon layers and layers of ancient settlements. It makes digging difficult without disrupting modern life.
Right. The past is literally buried under the present.
Despite this, a fascinating array of artifacts has been recovered, offering tangible proof of their economic vibrancy. These include fine pottery bowls and dishes, famously known as Northern Black Polished Ware.
NBPW. Heard of that. Very distinctive stuff.
Characterized by their glossy jet black finish, likely used by the wealthy elite for dining. We also find an impressive range of ornaments, tools, weapons, vessels, and figurines crafted from a wide range of materials. Gold, silver, copper, bronze, ivory, glass, shell, terracotta. It showcases incredibly sophisticated craftsmanship and specialized production.
A lot of skilled artisans must have lived there.
This brings up the fascinating complexity of urban economies and the remarkable specialization of labor that existed. We gain invaluable insights from short, votive inscriptions.
Votive inscriptions.
What are those? Dating back to the 2nd century BCE, these are essentially records of gifts made to religious institutions by individuals. These inscriptions frequently mention the name of the donor and, crucially, often specify their occupation.
So we know who was giving and what they did for a living.
Exactly. From these, we learn about the incredibly diverse array of people who lived and worked in these towns. Washing folks, weavers, scribes, carpenters, potters, goldsmiths, blacksmiths, various royal officials, religious teachers, wealthy merchants, and even kings. It's a snapshot of urban society.
A real cross-section.
Sometimes these inscriptions also mention guilds or shrines.
Guilds, like medieval European guilds.
Similar concept. Well-organized associations of craft producers and merchants. These guilds likely played a crucial role in procuring raw materials, regulating the production processes to ensure quality, and marketing the finished products. They might have even acted as banks by accepting deposits.
Wow, really organized.
This intricate web of specialized labor and organized production tells us much about the sophisticated urban economies of the time and the self-regulating nature of their crafts.
So for competitive exams, remember the Northern Black Polished Ware is a key artifact, the significance of votive inscriptions for understanding urban occupations, and the crucial function of shrenes or guilds.
Key terms and concepts for urban life.
The economic vibrancy of this period was truly driven by extensive trade networks that crisscrossed the subcontinent and stretched far beyond its borders, starting from around the 6th century BCE.
Not just local markets. We're talking international trade.
These were not just local exchanges. Land and river routes extended overland deep into Central Asia and even further, connecting India to distant empires. Meanwhile, Overseas routes began from bustling ports dotting India's vast coastline, reaching across the Arabian Sea to East and North Africa and West Asia,
And eastwards, too.
and through the Bay of Bengal to Southeast Asia and even China. A truly global network for the time.
Incredible reach.
Rulers often tried to control these lucrative routes, possibly by offering protection to traders and ensuring safe passage, naturally, for price, often in the form of tolls or taxes.
Controlling trade was controlling wealth.
Those who traversed these routes were incredibly diverse. You had humble peddlers who probably traveled on foot, carrying their wares, making local exchanges. Then there were larger merchants who moved with vast caravans of bullock carts and pack animals transporting goods across regions. And finally, the adventurous seafarers, whose ventures across the seas were inherently risky, but promised enormous profits from luxury goods.
High risk, high reward.
Successful merchants could become incredibly rich and influential figures in society. They were known as Masatuvan in Tamil texts and Sethis and Sathavahas in Prakrit.
Masetivin, Sathavahas, terms for wealthy traders.
A truly wide range of goods were traded, reflecting the subcontinent's diverse resources and advanced craftsmanship. Staples like salt and grain, basic necessities, various types of cloth, metal ores, and finished metal products, precious stones, timber, and highly sought-after medicinal plants.
And luxury goods, too.
Oh, yes. Spices, particularly pepper, were in extremely high demand in the Roman Empire, as were fine Indian textiles and medicinal plants. These valuable commodities were transported across the Arabian Sea to the Mediterranean, connecting India directly to the heart of the Roman world.
The famous Roman trade.
A crucial primary source for understanding this extensive maritime trade is the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea.
The Periplus. An amazing document.
An anonymous Greek sailor's detailed account from around the 1st century CE. It describes the Malabar coast, mentioning imports like large quantities of Roman coins, topaz, antimony, coral, crude glass, copper, tin, and lead.
So Romans were sending goods and money to India.
Yes. In turn, it lists high-value exports from India.
Yep.
Pepper, fine pearls, ivory, silk cloth, transparent stones of all kinds, diamonds, sapphires, and tortoiseshell.
Huge demand for Indian luxury goods in Rome.
Archaeological evidence, like the discovery of a thriving bead-making industry found in Kodumanal in Tamil Nadu, directly corroborates these accounts.
Kodumanal bead making.
It shows how local traders sourced precious and semi-precious stones and then brought them to coastal ports for lucrative international trade. Connects the local production to global networks.
That's a fantastic connection. So coinage must have been vital for all this trade.
Absolutely. How else do you manage these complex exchanges?
That's a comprehensive overview of the vast trading networks. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, coinage was absolutely vital in facilitating these complex exchanges and massive transactions.
Made trade much easier than barter.
Definitely.
Yeah.
The earliest coins, known as punch-mark coins, made primarily of silver and copper, date from around the 6th century BCE onwards. And they've been found across the entire subcontinent, indicating their widespread use.
Punch-marked coins. Okay.
Numismatist scholars who painstakingly study coins have meticulously analyzed these to reconstruct the vast commercial networks of the time. They map out trade routes and economic spheres of influence just by looking at where coins are found.
Coins as clues to ancient economies.
While some of these punch-marked coins were likely issued by kings, including the Mauryas, it's also probable that powerful merchants, influential bankers, and even townspeople issued some of them.
So not just state-issued currency.
It seems likely there was a mix, reflecting a diverse group of economic players. The first coins to consistently bear the names and images of specific rulers were issued by the Indo-Greeks.
The Indo-Greeks in the Northwest.
That's them. They controlled the northwestern part of the subcontinent around the 2nd century BCE, and their coinage, with ruler portraits, is a crucial historical record. It helps date things precisely.
Names and faces on coins, that's a big step.
However, it was the Kushanas, around the 1st century CE, who truly revolutionized coinage by issuing the largest hoards of gold coins.
Kushana gold coins, very famous.
These coins were remarkably identical in weight to those issued by contemporary Roman emperors and Parthian rulers of Iran. And their widespread discovery across North India and Central Asia indicates the enormous value of the transactions taking place and the extensive international trade links. Gold speaks volumes.
Standard weight suggests easy international exchange.
The discovery of hoards of Roman coins, particularly in South India, further illustrates that these trade networks were not confined by political boundaries. Even though South India was not part of the Roman Empire, close connections through commerce clearly existed. Trade flowed regardless of borders.
Coins were also issued by tribal republics, weren't they?
Yes, like the Yadhayas of Punjab and Haryana in the 1st century CE. Archaeologists have unearthed thousands of their copper coins. This underscores their active participation in the wider economic exchanges and their distinct identity, even though they weren't a massive empire.
So even smaller groups were part of the monetary economy.
And of course, the Gupta rulers, known for their artistic flourishing, issue some of the most spectacular gold coins, renowned for their purity and intricate designs.
Gupta gold coins are beautiful.
They undoubtedly facilitated large-scale, long-distance transactions and significantly benefited the kings through increased revenue and prestige.
But then the gold coins seemed to dry up later on.
This brings up an important debate regarding the economic health of the period, particularly as we move towards its end. From around the 6th century CE onwards, finds of gold coins notably taper off.
Why? What does that mean?
Well, this has led to a heated debate among historians. Does this indicate some kind of economic crisis? Some scholars suggest that with the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, a major trading partner, long-distance trade declined, significantly impacting the prosperity of states and communities that had thrived on it. Less trade, less gold.
The Roman connection was that important.
It seems to have been very significant, yes. Others, however, argue that this might not be a sign of crisis at all.
What's the alternative view?
They argue that perhaps new towns and more localized trade networks were emerging, shifting the economic focus. Or maybe coins were simply more in circulation rather than being hoarded, meaning less were buried and therefore less are found by archaeologists today.
So maybe the economy changed rather than collapsed?
That's the crux of the debate. It highlights how coins reveal not just economic activity, but also political power, cultural influence, and far-reaching connections across continents. They offer a tangible link to ancient economies, but interpreting their absence is complex.
So for exams, understanding punchmark coins, the significance of Indo-Greek and Kushana gold coins, the role of Yaudia coins, the beauty and function of Gupta gold coins.
Yes.
The extensive Roman trade connections, the crucial periplus of the Erythraean Sea as a source, the field of numismatics, and the archaeological site of Kodamanal are all vital.
A really important cluster of concepts around trade and coinage. #tag the art and limitations of historical reconstruction.
So we've talked a lot about inscriptions and what they tell us, but let's circle back briefly to how historians actually deciphered these ancient scripts, especially when they had no living speakers to guide them.
It really is an amazing intellectual achievement.
It's truly a monumental feat of intellectual detective work, isn't it? Like solving a millennia-old puzzle with almost no clues.
Absolutely. For Brahmi, the script used in most Ashokan inscriptions, and from which the vast majority of modern Indian languages are derived.
So the ancestor of many scripts used today.
Exactly. European scholars, working alongside astute Indian pandits from the late 18th century, painstakingly worked backwards. They compared letters from contemporary Bengali and Devanagari manuscripts, the script used for Hindi, with older specimens found on inscriptions.
Trying to find connections, patterns.
Right. Initially, scholars sometimes made the assumption that these early inscriptions were in Sanskrit, which complicated matters. The truth was they were mostly in Prakrit, the language of the common people.
That must have thrown them off track.
It did for a while. It took decades of painstaking investigations by multiple epigraphists before James Prinsep finally achieved the breakthrough in 1838. He successfully deciphered Ashokan Brahmi and opened a floodgate of historical knowledge.
Prinsep, again, so crucial.
The story of Kharoshthi, the script used in inscriptions predominantly in the Northwest, is a bit different but equally compelling.
How is that deciphered?
Here, the discovery of coins from Indo-Greek kings who ruled that area around the 2nd to 1st centuries BCE proved invaluable.
Ah, the bilingual coins.
Exactly. These coins had the names of kings written in both Greek and Kharoshthi scripts. European scholars who could read Greek were able to compare the letters. For instance, finding the symbol for A in both scripts when writing names like Apollodotus, matching sounds to symbols.
Clever, like a Rosetta Stone on a smaller scale.
Precisely. Once Prinsep identified the language of the Kharoshthi inscriptions as Prakrit, it became possible to read much longer inscriptions as well, truly allowing ancient voices to speak for the first time in centuries.
An incredible process.
That's a remarkable story of scholarly dedication. And it underscores how critical we must be when assessing historical sources, even seemingly direct ones like inscriptions.
Right, they aren't always straightforward.
When historians use Ashokan inscriptions, for example, they look for consistency across multiple fragments. Even though the name Ashoka isn't mentioned in every single inscription, they use titles like Tiyadasi. Exactly. They match content, style, language, and paleography to confidently conclude that titles like Devanampiya, beloved of the gods, and Piyadasi, pleasant to behold, refer to the same singular ruler, Ashoka.
Using multiple points of comparison.
You might also notice words in brackets within historical translations of inscriptions. Epigraphists carefully add these to clarify meaning, where the original text is fragmented or unclear. But it must be done with extreme care to avoid inadvertently altering the original intent. It's an interpretive act.
Needs careful handling.
Historians also have to constantly assess the statements made in inscriptions for their veracity and perspective. For example, Ashoka claims that earlier rulers had no arrangements to receive reports from their subjects.
Highlighting his own reforms.
Exactly. It serves to highlight his own reforms. Historians must then critically judge whether such a statement is entirely true, plausible, or perhaps an exaggeration designed to laud Ashoka's unique achievements and innovations. You can't just take it at face value.
Always question the source's agenda.
There are broader challenges, too, when relying solely on epigraphic evidence. If a king's orders were inscribed on natural rocks near cities or major routes, would ordinary passers-by, most of whom were likely not literate, have stopped to read them?
Good question. Literacy wasn't universal.
And even if they could read, would everyone across the subcontinent have understood the specific Prakrit dialect used in Pataliputra, the capital?
Language barriers, too.
Would royal orders have been uniformly followed throughout the vast empire, especially in distant provinces? Answers to such questions are rarely straightforward, requiring historians to piece together inferences from other sources.
Lots of unknowns.
These problems become particularly evident when we look at inscriptions like the one describing Ashoka's anguish over the Kalinga War. While Ashokan inscriptions are found in present-day Orissa, which was Kalinga, the specific inscription reflecting his deep anguish over the conquest and his subsequent remorse is conspicuously missing from that very region.
Really? That's significant. Why?
Well, this leads to profound questions. Was the anguish perhaps too raw or painful to be inscribed there, in the land of the defeated, or does its absence suggest a different interpretation? Perhaps the reception in Kalinga itself was different, hinting at the complex relationship between conqueror and conquered.
Maybe it wasn't politically wise to highlight his remorse there.
That's one possibility. These are the kinds of nuanced questions historians grapple with, acknowledging the gaps and silences in our sources.
Indeed, it's clear by now that epigraphy, while an incredibly powerful and foundational tool for understanding ancient India, has its inherent limitations that we must acknowledge.
No source is perfect.
First, there are significant technical limitations. Engravings can be very faint due to weathering over millennia, making reconstructions uncertain. Inscriptions can also be physically damaged, with crucial letters or entire sections missing, making full decipherment difficult or speculative.
Just reading them can be a challenge.
Second, there are profound semantic challenges. The exact meaning of words can be highly specific to a particular place or time. A word's nuance can be lost in translation or lead to ongoing scholarly debate and alternative readings among epigraphists.
Meaning isn't always fixed or obvious.
Third, and perhaps most importantly, there's a significant survival bias. While thousands of inscriptions have been discovered, many haven't yet been fully deciphered, published, or translated.
And countless others must have existed but have simply been lost to the ravages of time, destroyed by natural forces or human activity.
So what we have available today is likely only a small fraction of what was originally inscribed, a tiny window.
A very small fraction, yes.
But there's an even more fundamental problem when relying solely on inscriptions, isn't there?
Which is?
They often focus on grand, unique events, like royal achievements, major donations, or public decrees. They rarely record the routine details of daily life, the joys, sorrows, or challenges of ordinary people, or the subtle social dynamics that shaped society.
They give us the headlines, not the everyday story.
Crucially, they almost invariably project the perspective of the persons who commission them. This means they inherently offer a biased viewpoint. The kings, the donors, the victors, telling the story they wanted to be remembered.
The official version, so to speak.
To achieve a truly comprehensive and nuanced understanding of the past, historians must meticulously juxtapose these inscriptional accounts with other perspectives. Drawing on all the diverse sources we discussed today, archaeological finds, literary texts, coins, and art.
Triangulating the evidence.
For your competitive exams, be sure to understand the intricate decipherment process of Brahmi and Kharoshthi by James Prinsep. Know the meaning and significance of titles like Devanampiya and Piyadasi. Ponder the profound implications of Ashoka's anguish over Kalinga, and critically grasp the various technical, interpretative, survival, and inherent bias limitations of inscriptional evidence. This critical lens will elevate your understanding beyond mere factual recall.
Being aware of the limitations is just as important as knowing the content. This ongoing critical assessment truly highlights how historical scholarship itself is a dynamic, evolving field. It's not a static collection of facts set in stone.
History changes as we ask new questions.
Exactly. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, historians were primarily interested in the histories of kings and dynasties, focusing heavily on political narratives. This was largely influenced by the colonial context of the time. But from the mid-20th century onwards, the focus began to broaden significantly. Issues such as economic change, the development of different social groups, and the evolution of religious thought gained far more importance,
A shift towards social and economic history.
leading to a richer and more comprehensive understanding of societies. In recent decades, there's been an even greater preoccupation with the histories of marginalized groups, whose voices were often previously unheard or overlooked in traditional sources. How did the common peasant live? What was the experience of women or enslaved people?
Trying to recover lost voices.
This ongoing shift leads to fresh investigations of old sources, applying new questions and analytical strategies, and continuously uncovering new facets of the past.
So history is never really finished.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it means history is never static. Our understanding constantly deepens as new questions are asked, new methodologies are applied, and new evidence comes to light. It makes it an incredibly vibrant and relevant field of study that continues to tell us more about ourselves. #NATO outro.
So what does this all mean for you, listening in? We've covered a remarkable journey today, haven't we?
Quite a sweep of history.
From the painstaking decipherment of ancient scripts by foundational figures like James Prinsep to understanding the complex interplay of political, economic, and social forces that shaped early Indian history from 600 BCE to 600 CE. We've talked about the rise of the Mahajanapadas and their varied forms of governance, the powerful ascendancy of Magadha and its strategic advantages,
The Mauryan experiment.
the grand experiment of the Mauryan Empire under rulers like Ashoka and his unique dhamma, and the diverse new notions of kingship that emerged in the post-Mauryan period, from the stable southern chiefdoms of the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas to the divine Kushanas and the impressive Gupta Empire with its Samanta system.
A huge range of political formations.
We delved into the changing countryside, looking at agricultural innovations like the iron plowshare and transplantation, the complexities of land grants, and the differentiation within rural society.
A backbone of the economy.
And finally, we explored the vibrant towns, the extensive trade networks that connected India across continents, and the critical role of coinage, from punch-marked coins to the vast gold hoards of the Kushanas and Guptas.
The engines of commerce.
For your competitive exams, understanding these crucial terms, figures, concepts, and the nuanced debates around them forms the absolute bedrock of knowledge for this period. This deep dive aims to provide you not just with the facts, but the why and how behind them, enabling a far more comprehensive and sophisticated understanding of this foundational era.
Context and analysis are key, not just memorization. That's a perfect summation. And it brings up a vital thought, perhaps, for you to ponder as you continue your journey of learning and discovery.
Oh, what's that?
Given the constant evolution of historical inquiry, the innovative ways new questions are asked, and the inherent limitations and biases of our surviving sources that we've discussed, how might future archaeological discoveries or entirely new analytical approaches further reshape our understanding of these early Indian states and societies?
What might we find next?
What might be the missing stories? The narratives of those who didn't commission inscriptions or leave behind grand monuments, the voices of the ordinary people that we have yet to uncover from this long and profoundly impactful period of Indian history. What else is waiting to be discovered?